6 weeks ago, my life was painfully ordinary. My name is Elena Brooks, and at 26 years old, I was a piano teacher barely holding my world together. I lived in a cramped apartment where the heat rattled like it might give up any winter, and the walls were thin enough that my neighbors knew every scale my students practiced. I counted grocery money carefully, drove a second-hand car that coughed every time I turned the ignition, and measured success in small, quiet moments. A child finally mastering a piece they'd been struggling with for weeks. A student smiling because they played something beautiful for the first time. Late evenings alone with sheet music, practicing softly so no one would bang on the wall. I wasn't rich. I wasn't important. But I wasn't unhappy. My family never understood that. To them, success had a very specific shape. It wore tailored suits, drove luxury cars, and attended exclusive events where names mattered more than character. My choice to teach music wasn't seen as passion. It was seen as failure. I had felt like an outsider in my own family for as long as I could remember. My father, Thomas Brooks, was obsessed with climbing corporate ladders. Every conversation with him felt like a performance review I had already failed. My mother, Marilyn, cared far more about appearances than about how her daughter actually felt. And my brother Jason, reckless, entitled, endlessly forgiven, was the golden child who could do no wrong. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandfather, William Brooks. To the world, he was a billionaire industrial tycoon. His name carried weight. His companies employed thousands. His photo appeared in business magazines beside words like visionary and empire builder. To me, he was just Grandpa. His mansion wasn't intimidating when I was there. It was warm. Alive. A place where laughter echoed down marble halls and no one cared if I ran barefoot across expensive floors. On Sundays, he'd sit beside me at his grand piano, his hand surprisingly nimble for a man his age. "Money can buy a piano," he'd say softly, leaning close, "but it can't buy music. That comes from here." He'd tap my chest, right over my heart. Those lessons weren't just about music. Grandpa believed wealth was a tool, not an identity. While my parents chased status, he lived with quiet dignity. He wore the same tailored suits for decades, drove an old black sedan, and never once cared about impressing anyone. I spent more weekends with him than with my own parents. We baked cookies in his massive kitchen. Played chess by the fireplace. Walked the gardens where he pointed out flowers he'd planted himself. He listened when I talked about my dreams instead of dismissing them. Sometimes, I wondered if he knew I didn't belong with my parents. If he saw the way my mother flinched when I chose to stay at his house instead of attending another social event. He never said it outright, but in the way he looked at me, I felt something unspoken. A promise. "One day, Elena, you'll understand why I kept you close." At the time, I thought it just meant he loved me. I didn't realize it was also a warning. The night everything changed was unremarkable at first. I was sitting at my kitchen table, grading practice sheets, half listening to the hum of my apartment. When my phone rang with an unknown number, I almost ignored it. Something made me answer. "Miss Brooks," a man's voice said, formal and heavy. "This is Officer Daniels with the State Highway Patrol. I'm very sorry to inform you that your grandfather, William Brooks, was involved in a collision tonight. A drunk driver struck his vehicle." He paused. He didn't survive. The pen slipped from my fingers. Ink bled across the page. Didn't survive. My grandfather was supposed to be eternal. He was supposed to call me tomorrow to ask if I'd eaten. He was supposed to attend my student's recital next month. He couldn't be gone. But he was. The funeral passed in a blur of black fabric and hollow condolences. The mansion that once felt like a sanctuary became a stage for hypocrisy. My parents took control immediately, not out of grief, but out of pride. They argued with the funeral director about flowers. Complained about catering. My mother whispered loudly about how unbelievable it was that a billionaire drove himself. My father didn't cry. His eyes weren't red with loss. They were sharp, calculating. Already tallying assets. Jason leaned against a marble column scrolling through his phone. When I asked if he was okay, he shrugged and said, "I'll be fine once we know what we're getting." I stood by Grandpa's casket, staring at his peaceful face, and whispered, "I'll make you proud." I realized then I was the only one who meant it. 2 weeks later, his lawyer called. "Your grandfather's will is ready to be read," he said. "He requested your presence and your immediate family. Tomorrow morning." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. The next morning, I walked into the lawyer's office expecting formality. Maybe a small inheritance. Maybe a token acknowledgement. I never imagined the words that followed. "To my beloved granddaughter, Elena Brooks," the lawyer read, "I leave the entirety of my estate. $7 billion. The room went silent. Then it exploded. My father shouted. My mother gasped. Jason slammed his fist on the table. "That money belongs to us." I said one word. "No." That single word sealed my fate. That night, they threw me out. By dawn, I was unlocking the gates to my grandfather's mansion, unaware of who was waiting inside. The first thing I learned about inheriting $7 billion was that it didn't feel like winning. It felt like being marked. The lawyer's office had gone from quiet to violent in seconds, like someone had lit a match under gasoline. My father's chair scraped back so hard it nearly toppled, and he stood over the table with his face turning an ugly shade of red, veins bulging as if anger alone could rewrite the will. "This is impossible," he snapped, jabbing a finger toward the lawyer like he could bully reality into changing. My father would never bypass me. My mother's hands gripped the edge of the table, her mouth slightly open, not in grief, not in shock, but in pure offended disbelief. $7 billion wasn't a fortune to her. It was an entitlement she believed had been stolen. Jason's reaction was worse. He yanked off his sunglasses as if he couldn't believe he'd been forced to witness something so humiliating, then slammed his palm down hard enough to make the pen cups jump. "Where's my cut?" he barked. "I need capital. Grandpa promised me." The lawyer didn't flinch. He was calm in the way people are calm when they've seen the worst of families before. "Your grandfather made his intentions clear," he said evenly. "He updated his will last year. I was present for every signing. He underwent cognitive evaluations. There is no question of capacity." My father waved his hand like all of that was meaningless. "Just read it again," he demanded. "You misread it." The lawyer's eyes didn't soften. He simply continued, like a judge delivering a sentence. "To my beloved granddaughter, Elena Brooks, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all financial assets, real estate holdings, investments, and company shares, valued at approximately $7 billion. The room froze again, but only for a second. Then my father turned to me, and his eyes were no longer shocked. They were accusing. "You manipulated him," he said, voice low and lethal. "You played your innocent little piano teacher act," whispered in his ear while he was old and vulnerable. I felt my throat tighten. The instinctive part of me wanted to defend myself like a child begging to be believed, but I forced my voice steady. "I didn't even know he changed his will," I said. "I never asked him for anything." "I didn't," my mother cut me off with a sharp laugh. "Of course you did," she said, the words dripping with venom. "You were always the sneaky one. The quiet one. Always playing the victim." Jason leaned forward, eyes bright with greed. "You can't even pay rent without stressing," he sneered. "What makes you think you deserve that kind of money? You'll ruin it in a month." The lawyer moved then, reaching for a remote on the table. His calmness remained, but something in his expression hardened. "Henry anticipated this," he said. He left a statement. A screen on the wall lit up. And suddenly, there he was. My grandfather sat in his familiar leather chair, the one in the study where he used to sip tea and tease me about my posture at the piano. His face looked serious, but his eyes were clear. Present. Strong. "If you're watching this," Grandpa said, "it means I'm gone." My chest squeezed so hard I couldn't breathe. He continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Thomas. Marilyn. Jason. I love you as family, but I can no longer ignore what you've become. Greed has blinded you. You see me as a wallet, not as a father. Not as a grandfather." My mother's lips parted in outrage. My father's jaw clenched. Grandpa's gaze shifted, like he was looking through the camera straight at me. "Elena is different. She shows up because she cares. She lives with integrity. She doesn't measure love in dollars." Jason muttered a curse under his breath. My father shouted at the screen, "This is manipulation." But Grandpa's voice didn't waver. "She will carry my legacy with dignity. And she will not be bullied into giving it away." The screen went dark. The silence afterward was heavy and sharp, like broken glass. The lawyer folded his hands. "The will is legally binding. Contesting it would be expensive and, given the documentation, nearly impossible." My father stared at me for a long, cold moment. Then he leaned close enough that I could smell his cologne and the anger on his breath. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You think you can defy us? You'll regret it." My stomach sank, but I didn't look away. I walked out of that office feeling like I had just stepped into a new life without choosing it. The money wasn't sitting in my hands like a prize. It was hovering over my head like a storm cloud. That evening, my phone buzzed with a single message from my father. "Come home. 6 o'clock, we'll settle this as a family." No question mark. No request. An order. I stared at the screen for a long time, the logical part of me screaming not to go, but grief does strange things. A part of me still wanted to believe there was a version of my parents that could calm down. A part of me still wanted to believe we could mourn Grandpa like a family instead of fighting over his body like vultures. So I went. The moment I stepped into my parents' house, I knew I'd made a mistake. It was too quiet. Too still. The living room, usually arranged like a showroom for my mother's social gatherings, had been transformed into something colder. It felt like a boardroom, not a home. The lights were brighter than normal. The chairs were positioned with intention. Even the air felt staged. My father stood by the fireplace with a glass of scotch in his hand, the amber liquid catching the light. My mother perched on the edge of an expensive chair, her posture perfect, her eyes sharp as knives. Jason lounged on the couch, laptop open, fingers tapping impatiently like he was preparing numbers for a deal. "Sit," my father commanded. I sat, my hands clenched in my lap, my heart banging against my ribs. My father didn't waste time. His voice was calm, which terrified me more than shouting. "You know what you need to do," he said. "Sign the estate over to me. I'll manage it properly." I blinked. "Sign it over?" He nodded like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. "You'll receive an allowance. 10%. More than you'll ever need. 10%. Even hearing it out loud made my head spin. $700 million offered like a consolation prize, like they were being generous. My mother leaned forward, voice smooth as silk. "Enough to buy a mansion. Enough to live like royalty. You don't need responsibility, Elena. Leave that to your father." Jason snapped his laptop shut. "And I need the rest," he said bluntly. "I've got a company idea that's going to blow up. Grandpa wanted me to succeed. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word hit me like a slap. I looked at them, really looked at them, and something in me hardened. I thought about Grandpa's hands on the piano keys, the way he'd listened when I spoke, the way he'd smiled like my dreams mattered. "He chose me because I wasn't like this," I said softly. "Because I didn't see him as a bank account." My father's calm snapped. He stepped closer, towering over me. This isn't about what he chose, he hissed. This is about family loyalty. Either you sign, or you walk out of that door with nothing. My breath caught. You do that? My mother's lips curled. Don't be dramatic. You'll be fine. You're young. You'll figure it out. Jason smirked. Money won't hug you at night. You'll come crawling back when you realize family is all you've got. The room seemed to tilt, my vision narrowing. For a moment, I almost broke. Almost begged. Almost tried to salvage something that had never truly existed. But then Grandpa's voice echoed in my mind, steady and warm. Wealth is a tool, not an identity. Dignity can't be bought. I lifted my chin. No, I said. The explosion was immediate. My mother shot up, her voice shrill. You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you, private lessons, schooling, a roof over your head, you dare defy us? Jason's face twisted with contempt. Enjoy being rich and alone, he sneered. You'll choke under pressure. My father's voice dropped into something dangerous and soft. If you walk out tonight without signing, he said, you are no longer my daughter. My throat tightened, tears burning behind my eyes. Don't come back, he continued. Don't call. You'll be dead to us. The words landed and stayed, heavy and final. I stared at him, and something inside me went quiet. Not numb. Not broken. Just clear. I guess I've been dead to you for years, I said quietly. You never saw me. You only saw what you wanted from me. My father's face contorted with rage. He grabbed my arm, hard enough to hurt, and dragged me toward the hallway like I was an inconvenience to be removed. Pack a bag, my mother called after us. 30 minutes. Then the locks change. My hands shook as I stumbled into my childhood room. The posters on the wall looked childish now, faded evidence of a version of me that had still hoped for love. My old recital trophies sat in a row like they belonged to a stranger. I stuffed clothes into a duffel bag without thinking. Grabbed my passport. A quilt that had belonged to my grandmother. And a framed photo of Grandpa and me sitting at the piano, both of us smiling like we shared a secret. When I stepped back into the hallway, my father was waiting. Arms crossed. Eyes cold. He opened the front door and gestured outward. Out. The night air hit me like a slap, icy and unforgiving. I stumbled onto the porch with my bags, the weight of them nothing compared to the weight in my chest. My mother's voice followed me, sharp and theatrical. You'll regret this. Money won't keep you warm. Family is forever. I turned back, tears in my eyes, but my voice steady. Then why did you just throw me away? The door slammed shut. The sound echoed in the quiet street like a gunshot. And just like that, I was homeless. But I wasn't empty-handed. In my pocket, my fingers closed around a small brass key engraved with my grandfather's initials. He'd placed it in my palm last year with a wink. Someday. You might need this. I didn't know he meant this soon. I didn't know he meant this exactly. I got in my car, my old sedan rattling like it was as exhausted as I was, and drove through the dark with my duffel bag on the passenger seat and that key clenched so tightly my knuckles ached. When the iron gates of my grandfather's estate came into view, towering and unyielding with the family crest carved in the center, my chest tightened. For a second, I hesitated. The thought of walking into that mansion without Grandpa's laughter felt like stepping into a ghost. But I had nowhere else. The key slid into the lock like it had been waiting for me all along. The gates creaked open. I drove up the winding driveway lined with old oak trees, their branches arching overhead like silent guardians. The mansion appeared ahead, and my breath caught. The windows glowed softly. As if the house itself was awake. As if someone inside already knew I was coming. I parked and climbed the steps, my hand trembling as I turned the key in the front door. The lock clicked. The door swung open. And the familiar scent hit me instantly, lemon polish and cedarwood, the smell of my childhood Sundays. I stepped inside, my shoes echoing against the marble floor, the chandelier above casting warm light over the grand foyer. For a heartbeat, I almost expected Grandpa to appear at the top of the stairs, scolding me for being late. Instead, the silence was so deep it rang. Then a voice spoke from the shadows. "Miss Elena." I jolted, nearly dropping my bag. A tall man stepped forward, silver streaks in his hair, dressed in a crisp uniform. I recognized him instantly, and my throat tightened. "Walter?" I whispered. He gave a small, kind smile. "Yes, miss. Walter Hayes. I've been with your grandfather for 25 years. His gaze softened, and something in his expression made my eyes sting. "And now," he said gently, "I suppose I'm with you." My breath shuddered out of me. I hadn't realized how badly I'd been bracing to be alone. Walter stepped aside to let me in fully, then closed the door behind me with careful quiet, as if sealing the world out. "Mr. Brooks anticipated trouble," he said, voice low. "He gave me instructions. If anything happened, I was to protect you. He called you the true heir." Tears spilled before I could stop them. I pressed the quilt to my chest like armor. Walter led me toward the study, where a fire was already crackling in the hearth. "He wanted the house kept ready," Walter explained. "No matter what." I sank into a leather chair, the warmth washing over my chilled skin, and for the first time since the will reading, I felt something other than fear. Safety. But even as I sat there, staring into the flames, I knew it wouldn't last long. Because my family didn't lose $7 billion and walk away. They would come. And whatever Grandpa had prepared, whatever wall of protection he'd built around me, I was about to find out just how strong it really was. The house felt different at night. Not empty. Not lonely. Just watchful. The fire crackled softly in the study, throwing warm light across the leather chairs and dark wood shelves lined with books my grandfather had actually read, not just displayed. Walter moved quietly through the space with the calm certainty of someone who belonged there. He didn't hover, didn't overwhelm me with questions. He simply existed nearby, a steady presence, and that alone kept the panic from fully taking hold. I sat there for a long time, clutching my grandmother's quilt, listening to the grandfather clock mark each passing second. Every tick felt like a reminder that my old life was gone. I wasn't the piano teacher struggling to pay rent anymore. I wasn't the invisible daughter either. I was something else now. Something my family was furious they couldn't control. "What happens now?" I finally asked, my voice barely louder than the fire. Walter's expression tightened, just slightly. "Your family already came once," he said. "After the funeral. They tried to take jewelry. Documents. Things they believed belonged to them." My stomach dropped. "Did they succeed?" "No," he said firmly. "Your grandfather anticipated it. He instructed me to deny access and secure everything immediately." Of course he had. Grandpa was always 5 steps ahead. "But they won't stop," Walter continued. He knew that too. I swallowed. "They threatened me. They threw me out like I was nothing." Walter met my eyes. "That's why he prepared what comes next." "What comes next?" "Tomorrow," he said. "Mr. Turner will be here. There are files. Letters. Instructions your grandfather left specifically for you." The word letters made my chest ache. That night, I slept in the guest room I'd always used as a child. The sheets were freshly laundered. A book I'd left behind months ago still sat on the nightstand, a bookmark tucked exactly where I'd left it. It felt like the house had been holding its breath, waiting for me to return, not as a visitor, but as someone who belonged. I didn't sleep much. When morning came, sunlight spilled through the tall windows, soft and golden, completely at odds with the storm twisting inside me. Voices downstairs jolted me awake. For one terrifying second, I thought my family had already found me. My heart racing, I crept to the landing and looked down. Walter stood at the front door, calm as ever, speaking to a familiar figure. Relief washed over me so fast my knees nearly gave out. "Miss Elena," Walter called gently. "It's Mr. Turner." The lawyer stepped inside, his briefcase in hand, his expression serious but kind. He looked around the mansion like someone paying respects rather than taking inventory. "Your grandfather trusted me with more than his will," he said quietly as we sat in the study. "He trusted me with you." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope sealed with my grandfather's initials. My hands trembled as I took it. "He wrote to you," the lawyer said. "More than once." I broke the seal carefully, like the paper might shatter. The first letter began simply. "Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone." Tears blurred the words, but I kept going. "I know your parents and brother will come for you. They will try to frighten you, guilt you, and strip you of what I've given. Do not give in. This fortune is not a reward. It is a responsibility. And I chose you because you understand that." My breath hitched. "You will not stand alone. I have gathered people who care for you, people who will protect you when blood turns against you. Trust them as you trusted me." As if summoned by those words, Walter quietly stepped out and returned with a woman in her 50s wearing a simple cardigan, her expression warm but steady. "This is Margaret Lewis ****, the lawyer said. "Your grandparents' housekeeper for over 20 years. She didn't hesitate. She pulled me into a hug so tight it stole my breath. "Oh, Elena," she whispered. "You look just like your grandmother did before life hardened her. He adored you. Always did." She placed a folder on the table. "These are journals your grandmother kept. Records of visits. Requests. Demands." I opened one at random. "Thomas came again today, asking for money. When we said no, he shouted. Elena arrived later with soup. She stayed until William's fever broke." Page after page told the same story. Proof of my parents' greed. Proof of my brother's entitlement. Proof of why Grandpa had made his choice. Before I could process it, the door opened again. A tall woman stepped inside carrying a laptop bag, her posture confident, her gaze sharp. "This is Renee Alvarez," the lawyer said. "Your grandfather's business partner." Renee shook my hand firmly. "He wanted you to understand where the money came from," she said. "And how to protect the people who built it with him." She opened her laptop, pulling up charts and notes. "Hundreds of employees depend on this company. He trusted you to lead with values, not ego." My chest tightened. I wasn't just inheriting money. I was inheriting lives. By midday, more people arrived. The investment advisor who'd managed Grandpa's portfolio for decades. The estate manager who revealed updated security systems installed after Grandpa suspected interference. Even a retired judge, a longtime family friend, who had agreed to act as a neutral witness if disputes arose. Every person carried another piece of the wall my grandfather had built around me. When the last binder was closed, I sat back, overwhelmed. "He knew this would happen," I whispered. The lawyer nodded. "And he trusted you to withstand it." Walter straightened. "Your father will come back," he said. "And next time, he won't come quietly." I stood slowly, my legs shaking but my spine straight. "Then I won't run," I said. "I won't give up what he trusted me with." Margaret smiled through tears. "He'd be proud." That night, I lay awake in the master bedroom, staring at the carved ceiling beams. For the first time, the weight of the inheritance truly settled on me. Not the billions. The responsibility. And deep down, I knew the real test was coming. Because outside those iron gates, my family was already planning their next move. And tomorrow, they would arrive to take what they believed was theirs. The morning arrived heavy, like the air itself knew what was coming. There was a tension in the house that hadn't been there before, a quiet readiness humming beneath the polished floors and high ceilings. Walter stood near the front entrance, shoulders squared, no longer just a caretaker but a sentry. Margaret moved calmly through the kitchen, baking muffins as if this were an ordinary day, but I could see the precision in her movements. Every sound felt intentional. Every breath measured. The dining table was covered in documents. Legal folders. Financial statements. Letters in my grandfather's handwriting. The lawyer, Mr. Turner, moved methodically from page to page, highlighting clauses and signatures. Renee set up her laptop, projecting charts that mapped out the company's structure and employee protections. Judge Harrison sat near the fireplace, hands folded, his mere presence radiating authority. I stood in the center of it all, heart pounding, palms slick. "They're coming," I said quietly. As if summoned, the sound of tires crunching against gravel echoed through the estate. Not one car. Several. Expensive engines. Confident. Entitled. My stomach dropped. The pounding on the front door came seconds later, loud enough to rattle the chandelier. "Open up, Elena," my father's voice boomed through the wood. "This nonsense ends today." Walter looked at me, waiting. I nodded. He opened the door. They flooded in like they owned the place. My father led the charge, face flushed, eyes blazing. My mother followed, lips tight with disdain. Jason trailed behind them, his gaze already scanning the room, calculating. "This is still our house," my father snapped. "You have no right to lock us out." I stood straighter than I felt. Grandpa left it to me. Legally. Morally. Jason scoffed. "You manipulated him. Everyone knows it. A billion-dollar empire doesn't belong to a broke piano teacher." Mr. Turner stepped forward, calm as stone. Henry Brooks anticipated these accusations. He left written and recorded statements confirming his decision was deliberate. My father snatched the folder, flipping through pages violently. "Fabricated," he spat. "You think a judge would believe this over his own son?" A deep voice cut through the room. "That depends on." "Which judge?" Judge Harrison rose slowly. "And unfortunately for you, Thomas, I am one of them. Your father asked me personally to oversee any disputes. These documents are airtight." The color drained from my father's face before rage rushed back in. "You ungrateful little traitor," he hissed, pointing at me. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "You did that years ago when you chose money over love." My mother snapped. "After everything we gave you, you repay us like this?" Margaret stepped forward then, holding a small box. "Actually," she said gently, "this explains everything." She handed it to Mr. Turner, who opened it and read aloud from my grandmother's journals. Entries about my father's demands. My mother's indifference. My brother's entitlement. And page after page describing my visits, my care, my presence. The room went silent. Jason broke it by slamming his hands on the table. "Enough. I don't care about old journals. Just sign the transfer. I need capital." Grandpa wanted me to succeed. Renee didn't hesitate. "He already gave you chances. Every venture failed. He refused for a reason." Jason's face darkened. "You think you're better than me?" "For the first time," I said, standing taller, "I'm not begging." My father exploded, sweeping documents off the table. "This is garbage. That money is mine by right. By law," Judge Harrison thundered, "it is hers. You have no claim." Walter stepped forward holding a small USB drive. "Mr. Brooks asked me to install new security cameras last year." The footage played. My parents and brother rifling through drawers after the funeral. Stuffing jewelry into bags. Stealing documents. My mother gasped. "That's taken out of context." A police officer stepped forward from the back of the room, arms crossed. Context won't matter in court. For the first time, my father faltered. I took a breath and spoke clearly. You can threaten me. You can scream. But you will never take his legacy from me. Silence followed. Then my father spoke, his voice brittle. If you continue this, you're no longer part of this family. I met his eyes. You made that choice long ago. They left in silence, footsteps echoing down the marble hall, engines roaring as they disappeared down the drive. The house exhaled. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. But beneath that ache was something new. Strength. I hadn't given up my dignity. And for the first time, I knew I never would. The house was quiet after they left. Not the fragile quiet that feels like something might shatter if you breathe wrong, but a deep, settled stillness. The kind that comes after a storm has burned itself out. I stood in the center of the grand hallway, staring at the front door long after it had closed behind my parents and my brother. For a moment, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. There was a dull ache in my chest, the kind that comes from finally accepting something you spent your whole life hoping wasn't true. Some small, stubborn part of me had believed that if I just proved myself enough, if I was patient enough, if I loved them harder, my family would eventually choose me. They hadn't. And they never would. I felt a hand rest gently on my shoulder. I turned to see Mr. Turner standing beside me, his expression calm and reassuring. You did exactly what your grandfather hoped you would, he said quietly. You stood your ground. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. The days that followed blurred together. Meetings replaced lessons. Legal documents replaced sheet music. I sat at long tables with advisors who spoke in careful, precise language, guiding me through a world I had never asked to enter. Renee walked me through the company's structure, explaining how my grandfather had protected employees long before he protected himself. The investment advisors showed me records so clean and transparent they felt like a rebuke to everything my parents had tried to be. Margaret kept the house running like it had a heartbeat of its own. Walter was always nearby, steady and unshakable. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being talked over or dismissed. People listened when I spoke. They waited for my decisions. It was terrifying. And empowering. My phone rang constantly. Messages from my parents. From Jason. Some were threats, promising lawsuits and public humiliation. Others were dripping with false warmth, talking about forgiveness and family and how we could still fix this. I didn't respond to a single one. I had said everything I needed to say. 3 months later, the Henry Brooks Foundation for Education and Community was officially launched. $2 billion were allocated to scholarships, music programs, public schools, and community centers. When I stood on the stage at the opening ceremony, my hands trembled as I adjusted the microphone. This isn't just money, I said, scanning the crowd. It's a responsibility. My grandfather believed that wealth should build people up, not control them. This foundation exists to do exactly that. The applause felt different than I'd imagined. It wasn't polite. It was real. Life at the mansion changed slowly. The halls that once echoed with loneliness filled with laughter again. On Sundays, I hosted dinners, not for blood relatives, but for the people who had shown up when it mattered. Advisors, staff, employees, and their families. We crowded around the long dining table, passed dishes, told stories, argued, laughed. It wasn't perfect. It was honest. One crisp autumn morning, I drove alone to the cemetery. The leaves had turned gold, carpeting the ground in soft color. I knelt beside my grandfather's grave and placed white lilies at the stone. "Hi, Grandpa," I whispered. "I hope you're proud." The wind rustled the trees, and for the first time since he died, I smiled without pain. That night, I sat at the grand piano in the mansion, my fingers moving across the keys as music filled the space he once filled with laughter. I realized then what the true inheritance had been. Not $7 billion. But courage. Integrity. And the knowledge that family is not defined by blood, but by who stands with you when it costs them something. As the final note faded into silence, I felt at peace. Not because I had one, but because I had finally chosen myself.